Hello, everybody. We are back for the next chapter, chapter 20 of Charlotte's Web. It's called The Hour of Triumph. So, where we left off, the Arable and Zuckerman family had just gotten word that they were going to get this special prize for Wilbur in the grandstand of the fair. Now, that is like the most important part of the fair. That's where everybody goes. It's like not a ride, but kind of like a auditorium looking area where they have big events. And so they just found out that they're going to be giving Wilbur an award because he is just such a famous pig. And as you can imagine, the families are crazy. Like, they can't believe it. This is like the biggest thing that's ever happened. Especially to like a small farmer and a small farming community, it's just a lot of excitement because that doesn't normally happen. So chapter 20 is called The Hour of Triumph. So we're going to find out exactly what happens during this big event. Special announcement, said the loudspeaker in a pompous voice. The management of the fair takes great pleasure in presenting Mr. Homer L. Zuckerman and his famous pig. The truck bearing this extraordinary animal is now approaching the infield. Kindly stand back and give the truck room to proceed. In a few moments, the pig will be unloaded in the special judging ring in front of the grandstand where a special award will be made. Will the crowd please make way? Let the truck pass. Thank you. Wilbur trembled when he heard this speech. He felt happy, but dizzy. The truck crept along slowly in low speed. Crowds of people surrounded it, and Mr. Arable had to drive very carefully in order not to run over anybody. At last he managed to reach the judge's stand. Avery jumped out and lowered the tailgate. I'm scared to death, whispered Mrs. Zuckerman. Hundreds of people are looking at us. Cheer up, replied Mrs. Arable. This is fun. Unload your pig, please, said the loudspeaker. All together now, boys, said Mr. Zuckerman. Several men stepped forward from the crowd to help lift the crate. Avery was the busiest helper of all. Tuck your shirt in, Avery, cried Mrs. Zuckerman. Tighten your belt. Your pants are coming down. Can't you see I'm busy? Replied Avery in disgust. Look, cried Fern, pointing. There's Henry. Don't shout, Fern, said her mother, and don't point. Can I please have some money? Asked Fern. Henry invited me to go to the Ferris wheel again. Only I don't think he has any money left. He ran out of money. Mrs. Arable opened up her handbag. Here, she said, here is 40 cents. Now don't get lost and be back at our regular meeting place by the pig pen very soon. So Fern raced off, ducking and dodging through the crowd in search of Henry. The Zuckerman pig is now being taken from his crate, boomed the voice of the loudspeaker. Stand by for an announcement. Templeton crouched under the straw at the bottom of the crate. What a lot of nonsense, muttered the rat. What a lot of fuss about nothing. Over in the pig pen, silent and alone, Charlotte rested. Her two front legs embraced the egg sack. Charlotte could hear everything that was said on the loudspeaker, and the words gave her courage. This was her hour of triumph as well. As Wilbur came out of the crate, the crowd clapped and cheered, and Mr. Zuckerman took off his cap and he bowed. Lurvy pulled his big handkerchief from his pocket and he wiped the sweat from the back of his neck. Avery knelt in the dirt by Wilbur's side, busily stroking him and showing him off. Mrs. Zuckerman and Mrs. Arable stood on the running board of the truck. Ladies and gentlemen, said the loudspeaker, we now present Mr. Homer L. Zuckerman's distinguished pig. The fame of this unique animal has spread to the far corners of the earth, attracting many valuable tourists to our great state. Many of you will recall that never-to-be-forgotten day last summer when the writing appeared mysteriously on the spider's web in Mr. Zuckerman's barn, calling the attention of all and sundry to the fact that this pig was completely out of the ordinary. The miracle has never been fully explained, although learned men have visited the Zuckerman pig pen to study and observe it. In the last analysis, we know that we are just dealing with supernatural forces here, and we should all feel proud and grateful. In the words of the spider's web, ladies and gentlemen, this is some pig. Wilbur blushed. He stood perfectly still. He tried to look his best. This magnificent animal, continued the loudspeaker, is truly terrific. I mean, look at him. Ladies and gentlemen, note the smoothness and whiteness of the coat. Observe his spotless skin, the healthy pink glow of his ears and his snout. It's the buttermilk, whispered Mrs. Arble to Mrs. Zuckerman. Note the general radiance of this animal. Then remember the day when the word radiant appeared clearly on the web? Whence came this mysterious writing? Not from the spider, we can rest assured of that. Spiders are very clever at weaving their webs, but needless to say, spiders cannot write. Oh, they can't, can they? Murmured Charlotte to herself. Funny. Ladies and gentlemen, continued the loudspeaker, I must not take any more of your valuable time. On behalf of the governors of the fair, I have the honor of awarding a special prize of $25 to Mr. Zuckerman, together with a handsome bronze medal suitably engraved in token of our appreciation of the part played by this pig, this radiant, this terrific, this humble pig, in attracting so many visitors to our great county fair. So let's wait for just a second. Let's talk for a second about this prize. So this prize is a prize of $25. Back when this story was written, $25 would have been more like $200. So it was a pretty good prize. And the people back then, they didn't have a lot of money. They had crops and they had enough to live on, but they didn't have extra money for things like that. So that was a lot of money. And the other thing I thought was interesting about that is that the fair owners were thankful that Wilbur came because so many people came to the fair to see Wilbur. And when they came to the fair, they spent money. So the people that were in charge of the fair were very thankful and grateful that Wilbur came because they were able to make more money. So that's another reason that they wanted to celebrate Wilbur. Wilbur had been feeling dizzier and dizzier through this long speech. When he heard the crowd begin to cheer and clap for him again, he suddenly fainted right away. His legs collapsed, his mind went blank, and he fell to the ground unconscious. What's wrong? Asked the loudspeaker. What's going on, Zuckerman? What's the trouble with your pig? Avery was kneeling by Wilbur's head, stroking him, and Mr. Zuckerman was dancing around, fanning him with his cap. He's all right, cried Mr. Zuckerman. He gets those spells. He's modest, and he cannot stand any praise. Well, we can't give a prize to a dead pig, said the loudspeaker. That's never been done. He's not dead, hollered Zuckerman. He fainted. He gets embarrassed easy. Run for some water, Lurvy. Lurvy sprang from the judge's ring and disappeared. Templeton poked his head from the straw. He noticed that the end of Wilbur's tail was within his reach, so Templeton grinned. I'll get this, he chuckled. He took Wilbur's tail in his mouth and he bit it as hard as he could bite. The pain revived Wilbur, and in a flash he was out on his feet again. Ouch! He screamed. Hooray! Yelled the crowd. He's up. The pig is up. Good work, Zuckerman. That is some pig. Everyone was delighted. Mr. Zuckerman was the most pleased of all. He sighed with relief. No one had seen Templeton. The rat had done his work well. And now one of the judges climbed into the ring with the prizes. He handed Mr. Zuckerman 2 $10 bills and a $5 bill. And then he tied the medal around Wilbur's neck. Then he shook hands with Mr. Zuckerman while Wilbur blushed. Avery put out his hand and the judge shook hands with him too. The crowd cheered and a photographer took Wilbur's picture. A great feeling of happiness swept over the Zuckermans and the Arbles. This was the greatest moment in Mr. Zuckerman's life. It was deeply satisfying to win a prize in front of a lot of people. As Wilbur was being shoved back in the crate, Lurvy came charging through the crowd carrying a big pail of water. His eyes had a wild look. Without hesitating for a second, he dashed the water at Wilbur, and in his excitement, he missed him, and the water splashed all over Mr. Zuckerman and Avery. They got soaking wet. For goodness sake, bellowed Mr. Zuckerman, who was really drenched. What ails you, Lurvy? Can you not see the pig is all right? You asked for water, Lurvy said meekly. I didn't ask for a shower, said Mr. Zuckerman. The crowd roared with laughter. Finally, Mr. Zuckerman had to laugh too. And of course, Avery was tickled to find himself so wet, and he immediately started to act like a clown. He pretended he was taking a shower, and he made faces and danced around and rubbed soap under his armpits, and then he dried himself off with an imaginary towel. Avery, stop it, cried his mother. Stop showing off. But the crowd loved it, and Avery heard nothing but the applause. He liked being the clown in a ring with everyone watching in front of the grandstand. And when he discovered there was still a little water left in the bottom of the pail, he raised it high in the air and dumped it on himself and made faces. The children in the grandstand screamed with appreciation. At last, things calmed down. Wilbur was loaded in the truck. Avery was led from the ring by his mother and placed on the seat of the truck to dry off. The truck, driven by Mr. Arble, crawled slowly back to the pig pen. Avery's wet trousers made a big wet spot right on the seat. And that's the end of this chapter. Again, this chapter was called The Hour of Triumph. So we are getting to the end of this book. I know it's taken us longer than it would have normally to read it, but I'm glad that we're still able to meet like this and you guys can hear me read it because it's a really good book. And I didn't want you to not hear the end of it because a lot of you may not have the copy to read. So just tune in next time, and the next chapter sounds like it's going to be a hard one. It's called The Last Day. So we'll talk some more about that next time. Bye.